It was supposed to be a routine project for our fledgling game development studio. We had just landed a major client and were tasked with creating an immersive multiplayer experience based on ancient mythologies. Our team consisted of seasoned developers, each with their own unique expertise. Alex, the lead designer; Emma, the artistic genius; Jack, the sound engineer extraordinaire; and me, the newbie who was eager to prove myself. We had all been friends since college, working together on various projects before deciding to start our own studio. As we gathered around our makeshift office space in an industrial park, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was it, our big break. The client briefings were always exciting, but there was something about this project that felt different. Maybe it was the eerie feeling that settled in the pit of my stomach as we began to discuss the game's theme. An ancient civilization rumored to have mastered the forbidden arts. Our discussions were heated and intense, with each of us bringing our own perspective to the table. Emma envisioned a world of breathtaking landscapes and mystical creatures, while Jack saw it as an opportunity to push the boundaries of sound design. Alex was adamant that we needed to create a sense of tension and foreboding from the get-go, drawing players in like moths to a flame. As for me, I was too nervous to contribute much, but my mind was racing with questions about what this project could possibly entail. How far were we willing to go to create an authentic experience? What secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of these ancient myths? And what would be the true cost of our ambition? I remember the first time we gathered around Emma's workstation to discuss the game's concept. She had created a stunning visual representation of our chosen mythology, with eerie landscapes and creatures that seemed to leap off the screen. Alex was immediately drawn to the level design, suggesting ways to create an immersive experience that would draw players in and refuse to let go. Jack began experimenting with sound effects, crafting an otherworldly atmosphere that sent shivers down my spine. As for me, I was tasked with creating a functional prototype, something we could use to test our ideas and iron out the kinks. It was exhilarating to see the game come together, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. We spent long hours poring over code, tweaking mechanics, and fine-tuning every detail. Emma would often joke that we were creating something alive, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what we were building. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, a creeping feeling began to settle in. It started with little things, equipment malfunctioning, strange noises in the night, or an unsettling sense of being watched when no one was around. We brushed it off as mere paranoia, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. I recall one particularly eerie incident where Jack swore he heard a faint whispering in his earpiece during a late-night gaming session. He dismissed it as a faulty connection, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was trying to get our attention. It started with a dusty, old folder in the depths of Emma's computer archive. She had stumbled upon it while organizing her files, and at first, I thought she was just messing around. But as she showed me the contents, my curiosity got the better of me. The folder was labeled Erebus Project, a name that sent shivers down my spine. It seemed to be some sort of code name for an abandoned game project from years ago. Emma claimed it was just a relic from her university days, but I could sense there was more to it. She handed me the folder's contents, a series of cryptic emails and documents detailing a hypothetical game engine capable of generating immersive, reality-bending experiences. The writing was cryptic, but one phrase stood out: the architect's gift, a power so divine, yet cursed by those who dare to wield it. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized we might be onto something truly groundbreaking. Alex, ever the pragmatist, saw it as nothing more than a bunch of nerdy nonsense, but Jack was convinced that this was the key to unlocking our game's true potential. Emma seemed both fascinated and intimidated by the prospect, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something ancient, something that didn't belong in our world. As I delved deeper into the documents, a phrase kept echoing in my mind: the cost of creation. What did it mean? And what would be the true price of playing with forces beyond our control? As we delved deeper into the Erebus project, strange occurrences began to plague our studio. Equipment would malfunction, and tools would go missing only to reappear in odd places. Emma started reporting vivid, disturbing dreams that seemed all too real. She'd wake up in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, with an unshakable feeling of being watched. Alex began acting erratically, his usual confidence wavering as he struggled to meet deadlines. Jack's sound effects took on a sinister tone, as if the very sounds we were creating were taking on a life of their own. I started noticing strange symbols etched into the walls, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. They looked like some sort of code, but none of us could decipher their meaning. One night, I caught Jack whispering to himself in the office break room, his eyes fixed on an old, dusty book that seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly energy. When I approached him, he quickly dismissed it as a prank gone wrong. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being manipulated, that some force was using us for its own twisted purposes. Emma started to act withdrawn, as if she was hiding something from us. Alex became increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone or something was sabotaging our work. Jack's sound effects took on a darker tone, as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel. I felt like we were trapped in some kind of living nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within our own creations. As the days turned into weeks, our behavior became increasingly erratic. Emma's dreams grew more vivid and disturbing, with eerie landscapes that seemed to seep into her waking life. Alex's paranoia reached new heights, and he began to suspect that one of us was playing a twisted game of cat and mouse. Jack's sound effects took on a hypnotic quality, drawing us in like moths to a flame. I found myself questioning my own sanity as the lines between reality and fantasy blurred beyond recognition. It started with small things, misplaced items, forgotten appointments, and strange noises that seemed to come from nowhere. But soon, we were experiencing full-blown hallucinations. Emma would see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her eyes, while Alex swore he saw the client's logo crawling off the walls like a living thing. Jack's sound effects became so immersive that I'd find myself walking into walls or knocking over equipment, convinced that the music was somehow controlling my movements. And then there were the whispers, always whispering, faint at first, but growing louder and more urgent until it felt like an eternal scream in my ear. I started to wonder if we had made a pact with something ancient and malevolent, something that was now manipulating us for its own twisted purposes. The thought sent shivers down my spine as I realized that our game was no longer just a project. It was a portal to a realm of madness and terror. As the days passed, our behavior became increasingly erratic. We'd gather in the office, staring blankly at the walls as if trying to will ourselves back to sanity. Emma's eyes had taken on a glassy sheen, and Alex's paranoia had reached new heights. Jack's sound effects had become a constant hum in the background, making it impossible to focus on anything else. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within our own creations. The client's logo seemed to be crawling off the walls, taunting us with its very existence. One day, we gathered around the conference table, staring at each other with a mixture of fear and confusion. Emma spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're not just making a game," she said. "We're creating a doorway." Alex's eyes widened in terror as he nodded in agreement. Jack's sound effects reached a fever pitch, echoing off the walls like a chorus of madness. I felt myself being drawn into their world, a world where reality was nothing more than a distant memory. The client's logo seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly energy, drawing us in like moths to a flame. And then, without warning, Emma vanished. One minute she was there, the next she was gone. We searched the office frantically, but she was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had stepped through the doorway we'd created, leaving us to face the horrors that lurked beyond. We were left staring at each other in shock and horror as the reality of what had happened sank in. Alex was catatonic, unable to speak or move. Jack's sound effects had ceased, plunging us into an oppressive silence. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The client's logo seemed to be laughing at me, its twisted grin etched into my mind forever. And then, without warning, the room began to distort and twist around me. The walls seemed to melt away, revealing a realm of darkness and chaos beyond our wildest imaginations. A figure emerged from the shadows, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. It was Emma, but she was no longer human. Her eyes had turned black as coal, her skin stretched taut over her skull like a drumhead. She spoke in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "You should have stopped while you were ahead." And with that, the room erupted into chaos. The sound effects came back online, this time with a malevolent intent. Alex's body began to twist and contort, his limbs elongating like rubber as he screamed in agony. I felt myself being drawn towards Emma, my mind consumed by a madness that threatened to destroy me from the inside out. It was then that I realized we had unleashed a horror beyond our wildest imagination, a creation so twisted and malevolent that it would stop at nothing to consume us all. As I watched in horror, Emma's body began to dissolve into nothingness, revealing a void that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The sound effects reached a fever pitch, creating a cacophony of terror that threatened to consume me whole. Alex's screams grew louder, his body twisting and contorting until he was nothing more than a twisted mass of limbs. And then, in an instant, everything went black. When I came to, I found myself alone in the darkened office. The only sound was the soft hum of the computer equipment and the faint whisper of a voice in my ear. "You should have stopped while you were ahead," it said. I spun around, trying to see who was speaking, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to be coming from all around me, echoing off the walls. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, and I saw that the office had changed. The furniture was gone, replaced by a twisted landscape of nightmarish proportions. And in the center of it all, standing on two legs like a human, was Emma. But she wasn't human anymore. Her body was twisted and deformed, her skin stretched tight over her skull like a drumhead. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly energy, and her voice was like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. "You should have stopped while you were ahead," she repeated, her voice dripping with malevolence. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The entity began to speak, its voice growing louder and more urgent until it was like a tidal wave crashing over me. "I am the creation of your darkest fears," it said. "I am the manifestation of your deepest madness." And with that, everything went black again. When I came to, I found myself trapped in a never-ending nightmare of twisted corridors and darkened rooms. The entity was always there, watching me, waiting for me to make another mistake. I knew then that I was doomed. The creation had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. As I navigated the twisted corridors of my own mind, I began to lose track of what was real and what was just a product of my own paranoia. The entity seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time, its presence lurking just out of sight. Emma's face appeared in every reflection, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly energy. I started to wonder if she was still trapped inside me, or if she had become something entirely separate. The line between reality and fantasy blurred beyond recognition as I stumbled through the darkness. I saw visions of my childhood home, but it was twisted and distorted, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. I heard whispers in my ear, tempting me to give in to my darkest impulses. And then there were the sounds. The sound effects that Jack had created seemed to have taken on a life of their own, echoing through my mind like a cacophony of terror. I started to question my own sanity, wondering if I was losing my grip on reality. Was I still me, or had I become something else entirely? The entity seemed to be waiting for me, its presence growing stronger with every step. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, everything went black again. When I came to, I found myself back in the office, sitting at my desk with a notepad and pen in front of me, but something was different. The room seemed off. The colors were slightly muted and the air felt thick with an otherworldly energy. And then I saw it. A message scrawled across the top of the page, written in blood-red ink. As I stared at the message scrawled across the page, my mind began to reel with the implications. How had it gotten there? Who could have written such a thing? And what did it mean? The words seemed to shift and writhe on the page like living things, taunting me with their secrets. Suddenly, the room around me began to distort and ripple, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. The walls seemed to melt away, revealing a vast expanse of nothingness beyond. I felt myself being pulled towards it, drawn into a vortex of madness that threatened to consume me whole. The entity spoke in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien. Reality is not what it seems. It seemed to be watching me, studying me, waiting for me to make another move. My grip on reality began to slip further, the lines between truth and fantasy growing increasingly blurred. I saw visions of my past and future, twisted and distorted like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. The world around me began to unravel, thread by thread, until it was nothing but a tapestry of madness and despair. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, everything went white. When I came to, I found myself back in the office, sitting at my desk with a notepad and pen in front of me, but something was different. The room seemed off. The colors were slightly muted and the air felt thick with an otherworldly energy. And then I saw it. A message scrawled across the top of the page, written in blood-red ink. As I stared at the message scrawled across the page, my mind began to reel with the implications. How had it gotten there? Who could have written such a thing? And what did it mean? The words seemed to shift and writhe on the page like living things, taunting me with their secrets. Suddenly, the room around me began to distort and ripple, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. The walls seemed to melt away, revealing a vast expanse of nothingness beyond. I felt myself being pulled towards it, drawn into a vortex of madness that threatened to consume me whole. The entity spoke in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien. Reality is not what it seems. It seemed to be watching me, studying me, waiting for me to make another move. My grip on reality began to slip further, the lines between truth and fantasy growing increasingly blurred. I saw visions of my past and future, twisted and distorted like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. The world around me began to unravel, thread by thread, until it was nothing but a tapestry of madness and despair. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, everything went white. When I came to, I found myself back in the office, sitting at my desk with a notepad and pen in front of me, but something was different. The room seemed off. The colors were slightly muted and the air felt thick with an otherworldly energy. And then I saw it. A message scrawled across the top of the page, written in blood-red ink. As I stared at the message scrawled across the page, my mind began to reel with the implications. How had it gotten there? Who could have written such a thing? And what did it mean? The words seemed to shift and writhe on the page like living things, taunting me with their secrets. Suddenly, the room around me began to distort and ripple, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. The walls seemed to melt away, revealing a vast expanse of nothingness beyond. I felt myself being pulled towards it, drawn into a vortex of madness that threatened to consume me whole. The entity spoke in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien. Reality is not what it seems. It seemed to be watching me, studying me, waiting for me to make another move. My grip on reality began to slip further, the lines between truth and fantasy growing increasingly blurred. I saw visions of my past and future, twisted and distorted like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. The world around me began to unravel, thread by thread, until it was nothing but a tapestry of madness and despair. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, everything went white. When I came to, I found myself back in the office, sitting at my desk with a notepad and pen in front of me, but something was different. The room seemed off. The colors were slightly muted and the air felt thick with an otherworldly energy. And then I saw it. A message scrawled across the top of the page, written in blood-red ink.